Joel Evans was the first person in his family to go to college, and while he was working, he was a part-time MBA student. He then switched to full-time status and got his Ph.D. For 44 years, he was a business professor at Hofstra University. He has a great wife, two adult daughters, and two son-in-laws. And in fact, Joel right now is teaching a class virtually for graduate students in product management. He's a professor emeritus, and I can't wait for you to hear Joel's story. Joel, thank you so much for
Thank you
being
for
here.
having me.
All right, so I am so excited for you to tell your story because you had a cancer that so few people survive. So take us back to the very beginning of when it started and what type of cancer.
Okay, so I had been a type 2 diabetic for about 20 years before,
Okay.
and I saw my endocrinologist. I have to give him a shout out, Joseph Tarana, because he's the one that saved my life. In doing my quarterly blood work in January in 2015, he called us at 7:30 in the morning. You kind of get a little nervous when your doctor's calling at 7:30 in the morning. And he said that I want you to go for a CAT scan. I've already got a script sent over and I want you to get it today. So I got the CAT scan. And then he said, I want you to come over to my office after you get a copy of it. So we went over to his office, my wife Linda and myself, and we got there about 5 o'clock. He had a totally packed office. He had told his staff just to push us in. So we went right in. We were with him for over an hour. I must have apologized to him 20 times for what I was doing to his patients, but he's the nicest guy in the world. So he insisted that we couldn't leave until he had lined up a gastro doctor to do the sonar endoscopy, the one that lights up to be able to tell more, and that he was determined that he was going to help me find the best doctor possible to do the surgery. So he is really persistent, unbelievable person. So this was a Thursday night. Martin Luther King's birthday was the following Monday, and he had me set up for the endoscopy on Tuesday morning. So unbelievable.
Wow, very
So I
quick.
had it, and they weren't excited about the results. You know, they thought it could be malignant, but they knew that they wouldn't be able to know for sure until after they did surgery. So I had
Can I
had
back up
that.
for a second? So
Excuse me.
what was it in your blood work that caused your doctor to have concern? I mean,
Oh,
did he share
okay.
that with you? Yeah, I'm just
Yeah, sure.
curious.
I left that out. So he would run a whole variety of blood tests. And the one that he had pinpointed was this thing called bilirubin,
Oh,
which
yes.
until I got the pancreatic cancer, that's another thing. I had absolutely no clue what it was. I just thought it was one of the 8 million tests that he would run. So he didn't like the score on that test. And that's what set the whole thing off. So it was his perceptiveness as an endocrinologist in picking that particular um, marker out. And he told me afterwards, because there's a lot of stuff, because he told me that he was convinced from the time I had the CAT scan. There was a lot of stuff he didn't tell me because he didn't want me to get more nervous. But he facilitated everything. And so I took the endoscopy, and they didn't like the way it looked. So I was referred over to Gene Coppa, who's a doctor in, it's now the Northwell system, and he's actually the chair of the surgery department at the Hofstra Northwell Med School, as well as their executive vice president for surgery. So I was really lucky to get him. So we went in to see him, and he told me what he was going to recommend, which was this whipple surgery. And what my endocrinologist had said is, you want to move on whatever you end up doing as quickly as possible because pancreatic cancer spreads really fast.
Whoa,
And the
whoa, whoa.
reason why,
Time out for everyone listening and watching. So, at what point did you hear the words cancer?
I guess from my endocrinologist, when we went over with the CAT scan, and he said it's possible that it could be pancreatic cancer, but we need to see before we reach any conclusions. What he
Okay.
told me later on was that he was 100% certain
Wow.
because of the location.
So he was certain, but didn't want to say anything until they had actually gone down, basically looked with the camera. And all right, so he said that it might be cancer, even though he knew it was certain. I mean, what was your reaction? What was your wife's reaction?
Well, there's a kind of interesting story there too, and that is we believe on really being open. And even at that time, we had adult daughters. They were adults, and my wife automatically goes into DEFCON 5. So when she hears anything, I mean, she's been worried about me for 6 years now. That with COVID, I'm not allowed out of the house except to. Today I had a friend that I hadn't seen in 3 years. We ate outdoors. I was okay. But she was really nervous. But I said to her on the way that I just want to alert the girls that there could be something coming up, even though we don't know for sure, just like to tell them. So our one daughter lives 2 blocks from us. So I said, we'll just see if she's there and we'll pop in. And her expression was nothing. It was like totally numb, you know? And her guy was there to help her. And she's the one that's more stoic. But I know that inside. So then we went over to the other one who worries about everything. And this was the end of January, and her wedding was planned for October 24th of that year. So when I said something to her, she immediately said, we're canceling the wedding and we'll do a bedside service. And I said, we're not canceling the wedding. I am going to be there, and I have 3 goals. I'm going to walk you down the aisle. We're going to do the father-daughter dance, and I'm going to do the toast. So don't even think about anything else. So what happens, and I gathered this from talking to other people who were diagnosed or have been cancer patients, is that I was the calmest one in my family because I knew what we had to do. I was optimistic that it was caught really early, that I had the best doctor, and that my sense when it comes to things like this is to be optimistic, not pessimistic, that things were going to work out, that I was going to be there. And but the family was a total basket case. So the one advantage in the way that this worked out was how fast we went from diagnosis to surgery, which was under a month. And if there hadn't been for a snowstorm in New York, it would have been in 3 weeks. But when I saw Dr. Kappa, he said, I think that we should do the whipple surgery. And I said, okay. And he said, we're not going to know till we go in and biopsy the tumor as to whether or not it is malignant. Right. So I said, okay, I am all for doing whatever my doctors tell me to do. And when you ask me for my piece of advice, that's one of them. Listen to your doctor. Don't be afraid to go to the doctor. With COVID, I think so many people aren't going for their regular checkups now that it's terrible.
For people who don't know what it is, can you explain what the whipple is?
Okay, so whipple surgery was invented, and I found all of this out after I got it, because as I said, I knew nothing about pancreatic cancer, zero. For a smart person, I thought I was pretty dumb for the things I did getting ready. So the whipple surgery was developed by Dr. Alan Whipple, and it was started to be used in the 1960s. And it was when it was first used, the mortality rate was greater than 50% surviving the surgery, just getting off the table. So even though the 5-year survival rate for pancreatic cancer is still well under 10%, the survival rate of the surgery is 90%. So at least we've come far with that. And it's about an 8.5-hour procedure without getting too gory. The doctor actually takes virtually all of your organs out, puts them on the table, keeps some of them, like the gallbladder and the spleen, And when he's finished with the surgery, kind of rearranges where they are.
So
And so
fascinating.
he had told me that going in, he was going to, the whipple included moving things around, removing virtually all of the pancreas, and that also removing 1/3 of the stomach just to be safe. So I said, okay, whatever we have to do. He was great because he saw us before the surgery. He told my family that he would come by halfway through and give them an update, and that he would see them again when it was over. And he did all of those things. I cracked my one joke, which no one laughed at, which was the surgery is actually going to be the one part of this whole experience that's better for me than you because I'll be unconscious. Nobody laughed at that.
I think it's very funny.
They were too depressed. When I woke up, he had already talked to my family. He did what he said midway through. He did it afterwards. And then when I came out of the anesthesia, and I was still really groggy, so I had asked my wife afterwards, what did he say to me? But he had said that the surgery was great because it was early. He was able to get all the cancer out. And they have, this is another term they use, which is clearing the margin, which means that it was in the margin of the pancreas. It had not spread anywhere else, and particularly the lymph nodes. The bad news was because he wanted to be sure is that he saw something in the middle of the stomach. So he decided to take that out too. So I have 1/3 of my stomach and have it biopsied afterwards, because he said even whether it was or it wasn't, if it was cancerous, the last thing he would want to do is to put me through surgery again and anesthesia.
Right.
So the PS is that it turned out that that one was negative. But I 110% support him having done that, because better safe than sorry. It's just made my life more interesting. But as you can see, I'm not depressed. You know, like Lou Gehrig, when he was at Yankee Stadium when he was dying of ALS, said, I am the luckiest man in the world. And that's the way I feel every day, because I'm here at this time when, 90% plus of people don't make it. Those that are not diagnosed early enough to have surgery, the mortality is usually within 6 months.
Yeah.
So I do consider, no matter what, that every day is a great day for me.
Oh God, I love your spirit. Like it's making me just tear up, and I love your spirit so much.
Thank you.
After the surgery, did you have to do any other treatment? And if so, what was it?
Okay, well, after the surgery, I was in the hospital for 9 days. I was on a feeding tube for probably about the first 6. And I, again, without getting too gross, I had these really terrible bags that took out excess urine and pus and whatever. And then I went to light food, and I was able to go home after 9 days. We went home in a blizzard, so that made my wife even more nervous. And then I didn't realize how tired I was, because when I got in the door, and we live in a splanch, which means walking up multiple levels, we got up to the bed, and I just basically bounced on the bed,
Mm,
and she took over from there. But what they had told me is that it was my choice, but that it was recommended that I do chemo, and that I needed to wait roughly a month to be able to get back my strength to be able to deal with the chemo. So the only part of the process in terms of picking doctors that bothered me was this particular step. And the first doctor that I was referred to talked about the fact that I in all likelihood wasn't going to make it past the 6 months.
are you talking
And
about
I'm a
selecting an
couple things. One, because I'm an empirical guy and I've done research my whole life. I say to him, based upon what? He said, well, there was a study done in 1986 that involved, 50 people, and it's the definitive study. And I said, there is no definitive study because there are so few people like me that you don't know what's going to happen with me.
right?
So he had it, so I wasn't even going to make it to my daughter's wedding. So I'm like, oh my God. So I said something to him, because I'm not a quiet person. And I said, why would you tell me this? I went through the surgery. The surgeon, this top-notch guy, says I'm going to probably have a normal lifespan. And you're telling us, I'm just going at the data and I want to be truthful and realistic. So that was the end of him.
So I'm going to
And
stop for
then,
just a second again, so people
yeah,
understand. So you you had this surgery, had a great surgeon, the best. At this point for the
I'm
chemo,
searching for an oncologist.
exactly. Okay. So I just want to point out, listen to what Joel's saying. He basically, you fired your oncologist, the first one.
I didn't hire him because he
Didn't
didn't
hire
get
him.
to the
Okay.
point that he was. But this is another piece of advice that I know
Yes.
you want to say for the end. But the advice is, this is 2020. You need to work with a doctor that considers you to be an adult and talks to you, and don't be sucked in with, this guy's get big credentials and he tells me to do this, and you don't ask questions. That's terrible. Dr. Kappa is a big deal. I talk to him all the time. He never acted as if, he was, up here. And that's the way all of my doctors ended up being. So I love the whole team. But this one, you can't be, this is part, I think, what puts people off, is they get afraid from seeing the doctor because they think the doctor may be too judgmental instead of
Yes.
trying to be helpful and understand that most of their patients are relatively intelligent, not the other way around.
I know many doctors like the one you're describing who may in fact be actually very good at what they do, but their bedside manner is just atrocious.
Well, that's, to me, the two criteria to pick a doctor. One, they're a great doctor. Two, they understand patient relations.
So how did
And
you find the right oncologist? Tell people, since you are a research guy, tell people what your process was, especially after having
okay,
that
so
bad
now
experience.
we made an appointment with, I'll just, because since we didn't end up there, with another top 3 hospital group. And I had done some reading, too much reading, but I knew that I wanted to get a drug combination. I didn't just want to have one drug, even though the odds were 95% effective for the one chemo drug. There was a 3-drug treatment, and I wanted that. The big name hospital wasn't doing that.
Hmm.
So then I said, okay, I'm going to go to my go-to guy who helps me with everything, Joe Tarana, my endocrinologist.
Hmm.
And he recommended somebody that turned out to be terrific. The credentials aren't on paper the same level credentials. His credentials in terms of being a doctor, heading associations, now heading a large oncology practice, he was phenomenal. And what he said to me is, I can't promise you anything. What I can tell you is that we're going to work as hard as you do to make sure you live as well as possible for as long as possible. And Linda and I both said, walking out of there, this is the guy. We started out, it was, this is Dr. Vasurka, so I'll give him a shout out too. So we started in March. And what they had told me, because, you do have to listen to them, is that one of the drugs can have side effects in some people. And it could be splitting of the skin on the fingers, throwing up, all kinds of, not fun stuff. So just be aware that could happen. And you know that if I'm telling you this, that's what happened to me. So it was brutal. So I was on that one for only, a week or 10 days. And they had told me before, they gave me literature, they had me read everything, they had me sign off, but I was determined I wanted to at least try. So we were off it after 2 weeks. And what he said to me, look, I know you're really set on these 3, but the 2 you're on are great and everything's going to be fine. The chemo was an interesting experience, as I'm sure it is for most people who go through it. It was a brutal 6 months. In addition to the normal things that I guess, the nausea, the diarrhea, all of that stuff, I also had low white blood cell counts a few times, and I would have to go there to have a shot 3 days in a row. That was for the white blood cells. And for the iron, I would have to have an infusion, and I had a couple of those. Now, because again, I tried to to not make things overly melodramatic. And I was happy to be able to do everything. So I think the audience will appreciate this story. So one of the time, and early on, I had lost a lot of weight. I looked terrible. I looked like a skeleton. But I had been
How
doing
much weight are we talking and how tall are
maybe
you?
60 pounds, 70
Oh
pounds.
my
Yeah,
goodness.
a lot.
Wow. Okay.
So I have been doing a lot of interviews for cable news channels, and one in particular, I would do a weekly 5-minute spot relating to some area of consumer tips. And what they would do is they would come to my house and they would set up and we do 5 clips. And even though the clip was 5 minutes, it usually took 3 or 4 hours. Between the setups, the person who was doing the interviews had to change outfits for every one of them. So we did those. So she had called me and said, can we do some clips on such and such day? I think it was a Monday. And I said, sure. So it turned out that that Monday was one of the days I was going back and forth 35 miles to do the thing for my white blood cell count being low. And I decided I wasn't going to cancel it. I made the appointment to get, the medication as early as possible, then ran home, put on a jacket and tie so I could be ready to go. And somehow or another, I did, and on 5 different topics, I did 5 TV interviews of 5 minutes each that took 3 or 4 hours because of all the setups. And since she was determined to change her outfit for every bit, I said to her, I'm going to change my tie for every bit. And they
Okay.
came out and it is unbelievable. And you know what? I have trouble watching them because I'm so skinny. So you
Really?
look at, you look at my daughter's wedding. I had trouble looking at myself because I was so skinny, and everybody was so thrilled to see me.
Oh, I'm sure. I actually, at the top, when you said to your daughter that you were going to make her wedding, that you were going to do the father-daughter dance, that you were going to walk her down the aisle, that resonated with me so much because I think it makes a huge difference when patients have a goal, you know?
And I always have goals. I have goals. I was going to, after I had this, I was going to write my book. I was going to do a cancer blog, I go speaking, do volunteer work. I always have goals. But there's no question that this one was the driving goal for that period of time, which was brutal with the chemo. So the people watching or listening to this will like this story too, which is funny in retrospect, but not so much at the time. I finished up chemo, I guess, 2 days before my daughter's bridal shower. So my wife and the female friends were over at a restaurant doing the bridal shower, and all the guys were over at our house as we're getting ready to go. And we had a lunch at our house, and I had something for lunch. I took my insulin, and at that point, I still, even now though, transitioning from what was a type 2 diabetic, which was totally controllable, I could control the band like this with medication and insulin, to becoming totally insulin dependent and having the range go like this. So what happened was I thought I ate a sandwich, I ate a cookie, which I wasn't supposed to eat. I started to sit down and I got dizzy. And that's the last thing I remember till I was in the hospital. And what happened is that I passed out,
Oh,
and because of the low blood sugar, they told me, and this is still to this day frightening to me. They told me that in the ambulance, I hit 29. So for your viewers, listeners that don't know what that means, 95, 100, and 110 is normal. 75 is low. 50 is terrible. 29 is, again, thank God I'm still here.
blood pressure, so people know, right? Blood pressure. Yeah.
Well, no, the sugar count,
Oh, sugar count.
my
Oh, sugar
sugar,
count.
my sugar,
Oh,
my glucose, my
wow.
glucose. So,
Why did it drop so rapidly?
because when you are emulating type 1, which is what I am now, just it could take off for itself. And I must have, without realizing it, acted as I had before, and in effect taken too much insulin.
Got
That I
it.
was anticipating what time it was, what I was eating, and I wasn't in a routine yet of knowing. And
Oh God, that is scary.
yeah, so that's why he wants me to run a little high rather than a little low. So Hofstra is starting. This was a. I had the surgery. No, I didn't have the surgery. I got out of the hospital. That was a Sunday. Hofstra started Monday. I'm there for my first day of classes because I'm saying I had to miss the spring semester, and I promised myself that I was not going to miss any other time after the surgery until I retired. Zero. So I was there. So I'm there Monday, I'm there Wednesday, and my back starts killing me. So I get referred over to another thing that I never heard of called an interventional radiologist.
Oh yeah.
And they took an x-ray of my vertebrae, and they decided that there was a crack in there, and he had to put two little he put a balloon and then put two little pieces of cement in there to kind of even things out.
Wait, where did the crack come from though? Like,
From falling, from when I fell.
oh my
And I didn't
goodness.
realize it initially.
Did you fall on concrete? What, I
No, I
mean,
must have fallen on my house, which would have just been a wood floor. But it's
wow.
the angle at which
Angle,
you
yeah.
hit, you know.
Oh my
So,
God.
and this is another thing people can relate to who are listening or watching to this, and that is initially what he was going to do was refused by the insurance company, and then I was on my university plan. It wasn't Medicare.
Oh yeah,
He
please
was
tell us.
on with them till 15 minutes before the procedure, and I'm not going to tell you this doctor's name because of the story I'm going to say. And he was arguing with the insurance company, and he finally said, look, this guy had pancreatic cancer. We removed tumors. We need to do this because I don't know if there's a tumor in there. Because they were saying it's just going to heal itself. It's just,
Right.
magic. It's going to heal itself. But I was back. So I forget what day that was. That was like a Thursday. And I was back at Hofstra the following Monday. So, because I was determined I wasn't going to miss anything. So what I did have to do between, being weak from the pancreatic cancer and from the back is something that I have never done, which is to sit for the entire semester behind the podium. But that was also a blessing because I knew I needed to check my blood sugar more. So I had my meter in a spot on the podium that they couldn't see, that I could pop myself in between. And the one or two times that it got down to 75 or 80, I was also prepared. I had my M&Ms, I had my apple juice. So it's a process of learning, which initially scares the heck out of you until you can, figure out how things go. So I guess the next major event is my daughter's wedding, and everything went great. I didn't want to steal from her center of attention, but every time people saw me, they started crying. And when we did the toast and the father-daughter dance, it was unbelievable. But I had to make two concessions. One is I couldn't stand up during the ceremony. I had to sit down. After about an hour and a half or so, I had to go lie down for a half hour. And ironically, it wasn't from the pancreatic cancer. It's because of my back that I
Oh,
could only
sure.
do so much. But then we hung in there till I think 2 o'clock in the morning. So that was Sunday.
Wow.
Rested up, and I'm back at Hofstra on Monday.
Wow. Wow. Well, I know, well, I can't even imagine, but I can picture how happy your daughter must have been to have you
Yes, but
there.
while we were starting the father-daughter dance, and we have a different recollection of this, uh, she says to me, if you start crying, I'm going to start crying. And I said, if you start crying, I'm going to start crying. So she started crying, then I started crying, and she says I started crying first. I said, it doesn't matter, but I guess we'll have to agree to disagree.
Oh gosh, I love your spirit. And you said you were going to add a little something else about the interventional radiologist.
Oh, just the fact that he had a fight with the insurance company and in essence, not be totally truthful. But the part that's incredible is this is a guy that's gone for 6 or 8 years, more training in his special field beyond his medical degree. And he's got to argue with the insurance doctor who was, for the most part, a GP, a family doctor, an internist. How in the world can they fight with him?
I know.
But they did.
Yeah. Yeah. What was the worst moment for you during all of this?
Oh, I have more stories even after, but the worst part, I guess, physically during the depths of the chemo. Psychologically, somehow I was able to keep myself up the entire period. There's one other chemo thing I'd like to mention,
Oh, please do.
and that is that the oncologist that I went to had several different configurations for infusion rooms. So they ranged from having about 2 chairs to having 6 or 8. And the ones with the 2 chairs would have TV sets and they were more private and everything. And my wife couldn't understand how I gravitated to the room of 8 with no TV. And I said to her, because we're there to reinforce each other. Nobody's there to give anybody a hard time. And we kind of inspire each other. So even though I haven't seen them since, I think about them. And we would always, because we were on pretty similar routines for 6 months. So we get to know each other. How's your family? How are you feeling? So it was really an uplifting thing, which I think my wife understands now, but it's hard to, there are some things that are hard to understand unless it is you.
Sure. Sure. And I've heard that from many other patients where that was the protocol for them, where they would actually go to a clinic for
And,
the
and
infusion.
here's another story from that, and that is Dr. Vaserka, the oncologist, convinced me that I should get a port so that the chemotherapy drugs would go through the port and they would just do a simple hookup every time I came in. And he said, it's a 15-minute procedure. I strongly recommend it. My philosophy, you recommend, I take that as an order. So I did it. But the number of people, even in this room of 8, that would come in who didn't do the port, either because they were scared of it or they hadn't been told enough about what it was, that would have the injection through their arm. So that means every time they went this way,
Yes.
every time they went, they had to find the vein. And
Yeah.
you know what? After a month, the vein dries up. So, just watching that is just terrible. And I would say fewer people got the port than didn't. And it was no big deal. And what they had told me is that once I was 3 years into post-surgery, that if I wanted to have it removed, I could have it removed. So I had it removed just because I viewed that as another stage of accomplishment.
Absolutely. I think you'll appreciate this story. So you probably know a little bit about my backstory with my sister, so I
Yes,
won't go into that. But my sister had a port put in during her biopsy.
good,
Actually, it was put in very early,
good.
and it had a double lumen. So, and one for chemo, one for fluids. But one time we were going in just for her regular labs, regular blood work, and this nurse walks in and she's about to prick my sister. And my sister's already pulled out her her port, and this nurse like, oh, I don't know how to use that. I don't know how to do that. And I just look at this nurse, I'm like,
Huh?
find
You're an
someone who
oncology nurse?
does.
You're an oncology nurse?
Yeah. I was like, find someone who does. You're not going to stick her with a needle. And it was one of those times where I remember because my sister smiled, she didn't have to say a word. She just smiled. And yeah, yeah. I mean, she was a newer nurse, younger, but still.
Well, I would, after I was done, I would actually, for a couple of years, I would always go back to the infusion room and see the nurses that were there when I was there. And I'd always thank them. And I'd say, I'm still here. So you've got a success case.
Really? Oh, oh, I love that. I love that you went back.
I believe that everybody should be treated well. And if people have been good to you, you should be good to them. And I think, because we're talking about pre-COVID now, in COVID, everybody thinks they're, in favor of first responders. But I think it's important to always tell people, thank you, you're the best. My endocrinologist, the one who saved my life by the early diagnosis, he's a really modest guy. And after this was over, I got him a plaque with a clock in it that said, Dr. Tarana, from the Evans family, the world's most compassionate and best doctor. He hangs it in his house because he's not somebody that goes public, right?
Right. Aw. Well, what was your best moment during that time?
Today, my best moment is being here, and getting to go through all the events that I've gone through. My daughter's wedding, getting to retire on my own terms, getting to go back and teach, having knee replacement surgery in January. So I'm out there every other day at briskly walking 3 miles, being with my wife, who we're going to be married a long time, in a couple of months, my children. Everything is a blessing. And I think that's the way, I want to look at every day.
What is one thing that you wish you had known the very, very beginning of your cancer journey, like day one, you wish you'd known?
This is an interesting answer, but I guess to be smarter about the way that I looked for information. Because as somebody who's got multiple blogs and a YouTube channel and research and all this stuff, I like getting information. So there were 2 things in particular that I was really just stupid, I think. So I went to these chat rooms that were for pancreatic cancer, and they were almost uniformly down. Why is that? Because there were people who fell into the category of they couldn't have the surgery and they were pretty miserable, but they were all down. There was no support in it. So I learned what you want to do is you go to the Mayo Clinic site, you go to Johns Hopkins, you go to them, you go to their blogs. And then the other thing that I did, which I do view in retrospect as the dumbest thing I have ever done in my life, and that is I wanted to learn more about the whipple surgery. So I went on to YouTube and lasted through about 10 minutes of watching a whipple surgery. And I know you're laughing, but trust me, if you want to watch the video, you won't be laughing.
No, I'm laughing, okay, because I feel like we're kindred spirits because I had a hysterectomy last year. Finally, I did it after suffering from endometriosis for a very long time, and I put it off just because of fear, but I finally did it. I did the same thing. I went online, I knew the exact procedure, and I watched the entire surgery. I mean, I kind of fast forward through it because I knew it was going to be, 45 minutes to an hour. And I was like, what are they spending all that time on? How
Once
hard
they
is it?
start putting organs on the table, I don't think one needs to
No.
watch more than that.
No, that sounds far worse. I don't think I would have lasted through that, but I did. And I was like, why am I doing this to myself? I don't need to be
And did it
seeing
really
this.
benefit you in any way? It didn't
No.
benefit me. It just, my God, I'm having this thing next week and this is what I'm watching.
Yeah.
Go watch a football game.
All right. One of my favorite questions to ask. I can't wait to hear your answer. If you could only do one, I'm serious, one thing to improve healthcare in the US, what would it be and why?
I think that everybody should be able to have access to affordable care, and I know this sounds like a second thing, but related to that is that with this pre-existing condition stuff and even other surgeries, like the thing with my back, that the insurance companies can't say no, that we have access, and the access means something. Because if it wasn't for my doctor, in essence, fibbing or whatever you want to call it, I would be in awful pain right now. This wasn't going to get better by itself.
Yeah.
There was enough of a break that he was initially planning on putting in cement on one side of my back. He ended up doing it on both sides.
Wow. Oh gosh, that was awesome. Are you ready for these Thriver rapid fire questions?
Oh, sure.
All right. Beach, desert, or mountains?
My backyard, but I'll pick a mountain because I'm not a beach person and I'm not a desert person.
Okay. Beach Boys, Beatles, or Rolling Stones?
See, that's a tough one for me because I spent most of my adult life with the Beatles being it. But in my later years, it's the Rolling Stones. And my wife laughs at me because I can write books with them on. And she says, "How could you write?" And I say, "Because it's background music. I don't even pay attention."
Okay. Before you die, what is the last song you want to hear?
That's a tough question. I had thought about this. I think the song by Christina Aguilera, which is called Beautiful.
That's one of my favorite songs.
Tough
That
to
is
pick
one.
one, but I think that would
That's
be one. The other one, I'm going to sneak in the second one,
okay.
is Tim McGraw, Live Like You Were Dying. And I
Mhm.
know there are people that view it as a negative song. It isn't. It's inspirational.
Yeah.
It's saying, in essence, we have a certain amount of time here.
Yeah.
Live.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I
That's what
cheated with two.
you rule breaker. What is the last meal you want to eat before you die?
I guess a lobster dinner.
Last person or people you want to see.
My immediate family.
And the last words you will speak.
Please don't be too sad. Remember all the good times we've had together. And I'm always going to be in your hearts. You always have memories, so you haven't lost me.
Oh gosh, that's so beautiful. Aside from Cancer U, what is a resource that you recommend for cancer patients and caregivers? And I do want you to take this opportunity to tell us about your book and your website and everything that you've been doing.
Okay, so I wrote a book that's called Surviving Cancer and Embracing Life, My Personal Journey. It's been downloaded about 12,000 times. It is available totally for free, FREE hyphen ebooks, one word, .net. And if you type in Joel Evans, you'll find it. And the other thing that I'd like to mention is my cancer blog, which I've been doing for a couple of years now, and that's called. This is all one word: Surviving Cancer, Embracing Life.com, and it's intended to be, some tips that are related to health, but it's also intended to be inspirational. So before Ruth Bader Ginsburg had the second bout of pancreatic cancer that ultimately resulted in her loss of life, a couple of years before that, she was on David Letterman, and they were doing her workout routine because even being under 100 pounds, soaking wet, having multiple cancer things, she had a former Marine who was a trainer that they did a workout. And she made fun of herself because she was wearing a shirt that said Diva on it. And then she challenged Stephen Colbert. Did I say Letterman? She challenged Stephen Colbert to do the exercises with her. And then he starts to put on some rock music. And she said, "I'm not doing exercises to rock music. Put on, opera or something."
Yeah.
What an inspiration.
Yeah. Yeah. Very
So
nice.
that clip I have at my website too. If you go to the website, you can also, if you click where it says book, you can download the book there also.
Okay. We will
So it's
have
a
links.
PDF, it's free, and it is intended to be inspirational. I give a lot of resources within there, links to various organizations and things.
If someone wants to contact you personally, can they do that through your website?
Uh, I have very simple email that I use for one of my 10 emails.
Okay.
It's Joel, Joel, Prof, Prof, one word, Joel Prof, a professor, at hotmail.com.
Okay.
And I promise that if you correspond with me, I will get back to you. I believe that those of us who are as blessed as I am don't just have a responsibility to give back, we are obligated to give back. And that's what this last phase of my life is all about. That's why I volunteer with United Cerebral Palsy. I work with the Lustgarten Foundation. That's why I'm doing this interview today. I must give back and help other people. And that is my sole mission in life.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Joel.
you.
Thank you. Really,
Thank you.
I appreciate you sharing your story today.
And I wish you good health too. Be well.